Hey, we're back in Starbucks and we're going to do this really quickly because my recorder is flashing a low battery sign. Welcome to Horns Up. This is episode number, I don't care now.
32.
How are you, Peter?
I'm good, man.
Okay, and so we're going to indulge ourselves and talk about Cynic's very first album, which is Focus, released in 1993. One of my favorite albums of all time. One of your favorite albums
of course,
of all
dude.
time.
I mean, come on, that meld of jazz and metal.
I know, man. Like, I know Atheist was doing it earlier,
But yeah,
it's Cynic's album, which will be considered as probably, hey, we should actually do that, Cynic versus Atheist at some point in time.
I'm making a mental note.
Yeah, making a mental note. That's awesome. Okay, cool. Why are we talking to Cynic, Peter? Because you, stroke of fucking brilliant luck, while I was down working my ass off in Goa, working my ass off in Goa,
I know.
you managed to meet whom?
None other than Jason Gobel, one of the guitarists, the ex-guitarist of Cynic.
And a monstrosity, but...
Yeah, and he happened to be in town. Vishal Singh of Amogh Symphony calls me up and says, hey, I think you should definitely get him on the show.
Shout out to Vishal. Thank you so much for connecting us. I only wish I was there with you.
Yeah, man. And I think I'm not going to say too much because you have to hear the conversation. It was so great. Meeting Jason, felt like I knew him for years and he was so warm. So I'm really glad while he was traveling around in India, he took time out. Again, we met at a Starbucks. But it was great just talking to him, going back in the day, listening to all the stories of, the Florida death metal scene. And again, Cynic in Miami. Hearing about how Cynic kind of put that album together, it's just... I think I'm not going to say anything more.
Yeah, man. I think we're on a really good stroke of luck with Cynic here. We've had Paul Masvidal. We now have Gobel.
Yeah.
Now it's time to reach out to Reinhardt.
Yeah, I think that kind of completes it.
All right. So here you go, guys. Here's Peter's interview with Jason Gobel.
All right. And here we are at our old favorite recording place. Of course, a Starbucks. And I'm sitting none other than Jason Gobel. Well, welcome to the show, Jason.
Thank you so much. So glad to be here.
So I must say, because when Vishal first hit me up and told me that you're in town, I was like, whoa, you got to be serious. So what brings you to India and specifically Bombay itself?
Actually, I've been traveling Southeast Asia for about 10 months now. Just basically taking a hiatus from life. My kids are now grown up, and I had the opportunity to be able to travel. I always wanted to see this part of the world, and so I just decided to go for it. And India has always been such an incredible country with so much history and spirituality, a big thing for me here. So this was definitely a big stop for me. And luckily, Indian visa can be a little challenging sometimes to get. I got a visa for 3 months, so I'm running with it, and I'm traveling and seeing as much of this beautiful country as I can.
And how has it been so far? I mean, we talked a bit on the way here, but how's your journey been? It's been a couple of months now?
It's been, I think maybe a week over a couple months now. So it's been absolutely incredible. Wonderful people. I mean, the history here, the U.S. is such a new country. It's just doesn't have all the history, and India has so much. And India can be a little crazy too, I mean, some of the big cities are super intense, and then when you go to the small towns, it's like there's it's so small. But I would say one of the biggest things that has been just such a welcome experience as the people in India. It's probably the warmest country that I've been to, and just the nicest people, and it's been very welcoming. I've felt absolutely great here, and very blessed to be here.
For us at Horns Up, it's great to speak to you because both for Animation, me, Cynic has been a huge band, and especially Focus. I mean, we'll dive all into that because when I was doing my research, I realized that was not the only album that a lot of us metalheads have listened to and have enjoyed your music playing in. You've been involved and played a part in so many different bands. But just to take you back and jog a few years, I say a few years, but a few decades, really.
Yes, yeah.
Uh,
26 years for Focus now.
Yeah, but just to go a few years before that, I mean, like, for us sitting in India, it was very different, kind of like, listening to all these different bands. But as somebody who kind of grew up in that area, and you grew up in Miami, what was it like? I mean, of course, you didn't have any inkling as to what this whole scene would be like. But what was it like just growing up there and kind of seeing all these different bands?
It's interesting because it's not the first time that I've been asked that question, and nobody knew the Florida scene was going to be considered, a classic death metal and a location, and even the bands, all the bands that came out of there, I can't even tell you why they did. It's crazy, but it was interesting to me. Actually, it felt like a small scene. It still felt like, because and we were in Miami, so we were still a little outside. Your real section is Tampa and Orlando, which we went and we played there, and we were in connection with all the bands there, but we were still even considered kind of the outsiders being in Miami.
Okay.
Yeah, and also Miami has such a Latin influence. I'm half Cuban, half American. Tony Choi is Hispanic. Paul is Hispanic. Reinert, of course, is from German descent. But it was a totally different game, and I think that's also kind of what maybe set us apart, or that influence, the Latin influence, maybe helped us sound a little different than some of the bands there. But it was amazing. I mean, we could literally just go hang out with Chuck Schuldiner and or go see Morbid Angel or Nocturnus or all these crazy heavy bands that were coming out of there, and I think that we unknowingly took it for granted. Those were just the local bands, and there was there's still bands that were in Europe and stuff that were like, it'd be so cool to see them, but I don't even think at that time we realized how much we had in our area. In our backyard, it was just right there. So it was a good experience. It was really cool to be able to play and get to know all those guys, and it was just local shows back then, and we go play with Atheist or Malevolent Creation or any
one of my
any
favorite
of those guys.
bands, man.
Yeah,
Atheist.
Atheist is just amazing band, for sure.
But I mean, what was it like discovering? I mean, of course, you had with the Tampa being the hotbed in there, but was tape trading? I mean, of course, tape trading is far before my time. But how important was it back then, tape trading?
It was huge. Actually, before the interview, we had talked about, metal zines and fanzines and stuff like that. That was it. I mean, I remember, you would mail order an actual fanzine, and you would look through and you'd, send your little cashier's check or sometimes cash or whatever, and you'd mail it off and wait for a demo, and sometimes it would take a couple months, before you'd get it. And then from there you would trade with your friends, and it was all underground back then, and that was the only way to get the music. It just wasn't it wasn't in a record store, which is another thing that doesn't really
I know it's
exist.
a bit of a stretch, but could you jog your memory and tell me a couple of bands that really stood out for you, that you picked up a demo from, perhaps?
Jeez. Gosh, that's actually funny. Meshuggah.
Wow.
Meshuggah, before they really sounded like
So this is
Meshuggah
Meshuggah.
as we know it, when they were more like a thrash band, and that would be one that was interesting, that just stands out. Gosh, that's really pushing my old memory there.
What about the Bay Area thrash? Did you kind of get those demos? I know Metallica did a bunch of demos.
Yeah, Metallica Possessed.
Oh yeah, Possessed.
Possessed was definitely was one that we definitely dug and all that. And yeah, it's the same thing. It was, I guess, some of the Bay Area bands you could find a little easier because at least it was in the States.
Yeah,
it was some of the European bands that were harder to get, and Wehrmacht or, there was just some yeah, it was just really hard to get, and even remembering all the names is insane. But I do remember just looking through the zines, and just actually writing a little letter, dude, send me the demo. Here's the $5, and you mail it off, and you forget about it, and then a few months later, you're like, oh my God, I got a demo in the mail, and it was a totally different game. So if you wanted to listen to anything, extreme, you really had to work for it back in the day. You really had to search for it and find it, and again, for us, we were, I guess, more fortunate because you did have bands. Morbid and just the bigger bands or some of the heavier bands that were closer to us, but anything else you really had to search for it and trade.
But just again moving and being specific to Miami, while you were talking that you had Death, you had Atheist and stuff, who are the bigger bands that you all were aspiring to be like as musicians, or what as a reference point, who was the bands that kind of made it for you?
In the metal scene.
In the metal scene, yeah.
In the metal scene. Gosh, I went through all kinds of stuff, even some of the... I remember I used to love Corrosion of Conformity, Crumbsuckers, and they were kind of like a thrashcore back then, and we're going, way back.
Yeah.
Of course, Death. Atheist, although we came up a little behind them time-wise, was a big influence for us. Those guys, because they were also technical and everything like that. And I would say some of those. Gosh, there's so many bands I can't even put a pin on it. I mean, and we listened to everything because back then Morbid Angel was huge, and I would say they all influenced us, because it was just back then you're hungry, man. You didn't get it as much. It wasn't available. You really had to work for it. So anything you could get your hands on, you just really listened to and absorbed,
Yeah. Tell me about now. I know we're going to focus on one band primarily. Sorry for using that term, but that's the best.
Oh, yeah. No, not at all.
It was unintentional. But how did you kind of meet? Because I mean, I've read the story, but I want to hear it. And if you can if I can transport you back in time where you first met Paul and Sean, and how did you kind of form? Was Cynic already a band before you joined? If you could just
yes, they weren't around too long. It was Paul, Sean, Mark Van Erp from Monstrosity, who I also played with on Monstrosity, and a gentleman named Jack Kelly was the singer.
Right.
And that was the band, and they did one demo. And the way that we actually met, so me, I was already leaning towards heavy music. I was already playing heavy stuff, but I didn't know many people. I didn't know many people in the scene that were actually playing it. And my brother was a bass player, and he was playing in more of the rock metal scene. But back in the day in Miami, you would have actual keg parties.
All right.
So they'd just find a place to play, even sometimes an open field, set up a stage, put a few bands, open up a couple kegs, and people would come out and play. So you'd always go and see whatever local bands. That's when local music was still being played live, and so my brother was actually playing a show. And so I went out to support my brother. It was this keg party somewhere, I don't even remember where, and Cynic actually opened up for my brother's band.
Oh wow! So you watched Cynic?
Yeah.
Wow.
They actually not opened up for my brother's band, but they were just slotted before his band. So I remember watching them and going, "Wow! I didn't even know there were other guys playing this type of music around here. I didn't know of any other, heavy bands."
And what was their
locally
sound around that time, if I may ask?
Actually, if you listen to the album that was just released with all the demos, it's the first few songs. That was what they were playing, like "Dwellers of the Threshold" and songs like that. That was their first demo, and it was just they only played a small slot, maybe 20-30 minutes, and played the few songs. But for me, it was just awesome that someone else was. I was sick of the glam metal rock stuff that was going on, the big hair. My brother was doing it, and I was like, screw this stuff, man. And so they played, and I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Actually, kind of dug what they were doing. Well, my brother, as he's getting up on stage, he goes over to Paul and Sean and goes, wow, man. He goes, you guys play that heavy stuff. He goes, are you guys looking for another guitarist? Because my little brother is playing that pissed off shit also, is what he kind of said to him. And they said, yeah, actually, we are looking for another guitar player. So after my brother played, he actually introduced me to, it was Paul and Sean, who I ended up talking to. So from there, we talked, and we had set up a meeting at the warehouse, at their warehouse. And I came out, and I played for them, and then we jammed a little bit, and I played some of my actual ideas. And I guess there was another guitarist that they were looking at the time, and I ended up getting the slot. And I think it was the writing. That's one thing that was always my specialty, or my passion was writing music. So
right.
I had actually thrown out a couple rhythms, and I just remember them looking and kind of going, oh wow, like they liked what I was writing. And I think we had a similar style, obviously it worked. So the next day they called me up and they said, hey, you got the spot. And from there, that was the beginning of the end, I guess, how we'd say.
Yeah. And of course, like when you go through the Cynic website and you read the stories about, there was a lot that happened. I mean, from the time you're talking about in the demos, did you all record any demos after you joined?
Oh, yeah. Reflections of a Dying World. Everything after that, I think it was Reflections of the Dying World. Wasn't it a 1990 demo? And then, and a Roadrunner release. I can't even remember, but I think it was 3 demos that we did.
And what was it like? Where were these being recorded? Was it at Morris Sound already?
So interesting. Let me see. Thresholds of a Dying World we actually went in a studio and we recorded. The next demo we did, and that's the one I think that has Pleading for Preservation. Again, man, gosh, it's so long ago. We actually recorded ourselves. We actually took multi-track production techniques. By then, we actually entered into college. We took multi-track production techniques, and one of the final test was you had to record a song.
Oh, yeah.
And we're like, bro, let's record a demo. So me, Paul, and Sean, we each did a different song for
your class,
for our final. So that was one of the demos, and then the other one was paid for by Roadrunner, and that was on. They wanted to hear kind of what we were going to do for the album, and kind of a contingent on getting the album deal, and that we did at Morris Sound with Scott Burns.
Okay, and I think by then word had really spread about Cynic. By then, I mean, everyone.
And that was the problem. We couldn't get signed. Because we were too technical and not catchy enough. We heard all the negative things about our music, but there was a hype. So what had happened, and I may be regurgitating the same story, but what had happened is we were having a hard time getting signed, but we were getting a fan base. But since we couldn't get signed, that's when the opportunity came up for Paul and Sean to play with Death, Tony with Atheist and Pestilence, and me with Monstrosity. So we actually sat down and we said, listen, we're not getting signed. No one wants to deal with us. We're too technical. So let's take this opportunity. Let's go play on these other albums specifically to try to get more hype going for us so we can get signed. So it was known that we were going to do this, but then the main intent was to come back to Cynic so we can ultimately get a deal and do our music.
Right. And I mean, it's a great way you kind of brought up about your involvement with Monstrosity, because I was like, whoa, I had no idea about it. And just tell me about it. What was it like? Because I mean, it's strange we're talking about Monstrosity when earlier this year they just put out an album. So
Yeah.
they're still going strong. And
Yeah.
and that's the thing about some of these bands that it's great to hear these stories from people who've actually been there in the early days and stuff. What is it like?
Okay, well, so the monstrosity tie. So Mark Van Erp was in Cynic.
Yeah.
You know, he was the first bass player. So we were friends. You know, we were great friends and all that. And long story short, when he ended up leaving the band, Lee Harrison was already in the scene and playing around. So they ended up joining and were jamming and playing. And then eventually, I can't speak for their formation, but eventually Monstrosity got formed. And you know, props to Lee Harrison. The guy is as hardcore as it gets. He is death metal to the core.
Yeah.
I don't know if Monstrosity ever broke up. I think they've always stayed true, and they're always going for it. And yes, they just recently released, I heard. So, but so at the time, they had finally gotten their first deal, and they had needed another guitarist. I don't remember what the story is, why, if they had one and it didn't work out. But long story short, Paul and Sean had just gotten the offer to play with Death, and then Tony, I'm not sure if it was Atheist or if it was Pestilence. They had gotten the offer, so they needed a guitarist, and Lee and Mark actually had come up to me, and they're like, bro, we need another guitarist, and I know those guys are playing, you know, you want to play with us? And I was like, hell yeah, man, let's do it, you know, and again, they're just great guys, and so they had most of the album finished. I contributed a few rhythms here and there to help them finish, and then my solos and all that, but they just needed someone. It was an opportunity for them to have someone play with them. It was an opportunity for me to play on an album. And I dug what they were doing. Corpse Grinder was just vicious and violent as always, and they're all great guys. So,
and I think this is where the scene kind of had no idea that Corpse Grinder would be or become the Corpse Grinder that he is today.
No one.
I don't think anyone at that point.
So I remember the first time I saw Corpse Grinder. If I remember correctly, he's originally from Maryland, and he had come down to the Florida scene, and I think he came down specifically to get into the music. So I'm sitting there at a show one day, and I'm near the pit, and right on the outskirts of the pit, I hear someone belting out the lyrics. I forgot who was playing, belting out the lyrics, and it was heavier than whoever was playing. And I look over, and it's Corpse, and he's there just, head banging, head spinning and screaming. And bro, his neck was already there, you know? He just had that, you know, you don't forget it when you see it, you know? And that's the first time I had seen him. And then, you know, we ended up, you're in the scene, you end up meeting, and he's actually, as brutal as he sounds, he is actually just a sweetheart of a guy.
Oh, yeah.
He's an absolute just great guy and just super, super nice guy. But yeah, I don't think anyone realized what he's like an icon of the scene now and everything.
I mean, come on, they made a cartoon character based on it.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, absolutely. And it looks somewhat like him too. And you know, the whole cannibal thing is insane.
But so, tell me about Imperial Doom, because, like, you know, if you look at it also from Monstrosity, right? It's one of those albums where it's kind of overlooked in a way. Of course, the older generation will kind of remember it, and I would attribute it probably with the people who spent more time with it, right? What was it like in terms of course, I'm sure at that time, again, no one had any idea Monstrosity so many years later would still be releasing music and stuff like that.
Right.
But what is it like recording at that time with the band?
You know, and again, I think, you know, we were all trying to make our way in the scene. You know, I think that's a given. But I don't think that anyone had any idea that the Florida scene, again, was going to be what it is today, or considered just such a classic what it is today. But recording with them and hanging out with them is awesome. I mean, they're just all great guys. John Rubin he's just another sweetheart of a guy. And So it was a great experience. You know, it's funny, the Cynic Focus album, the recording of it was definitely more intense, and there was, you know, it was a lot more hard times, but recording with Monstrosity was a pleasure, man. Everybody was there. Everybody was 100%. Everybody was into it. The times in the studio, everything was good energy and good vibes, and we were just excited to be able to do an album, man, and be able to do. It was their first album. It was my first album. You know what I mean? So it was just, it was a surreal experience, I think, for us in a lot of ways. You just don't believe it's happening when it's happening, and you have no idea what it's going to be.
And I just realized, because with all the stories you've told me so far, you can actually draw like a 6 degrees of separation. I think it'll be like 3 degrees of separation with most of these bands, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's interesting. I mean, because it's all the same, but it's also different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. That's, I guess that's the best I could describe.
But did you post that play the album live? Did you tour with Monstrosity?
No,
Okay.
because by the time we had finished, the Cynic opportunity came up, and I went that way. I played one show with them, a Milwaukee Metal Fest.
Oh, wow. I've heard a lot about this.
Yeah, that was a big event back then, you know, in those days. And so I did get to play one show with them in Milwaukee.
Do you
which was
remember which of the bands playing?
Huh?
Which other bands performed?
I don't remember which other bands were playing, to be honest with you. I don't remember, man. It was so long ago. I do remember playing with them,
All right.
and doing the whole scene, and it was great. It was intense, you know, because, well, I mean, Monstrosity, I'd say the biggest challenge I had with them was the speed, man.
Oh, yeah.
They fly, bro. They fly. Even when I decided to, when I took the offer graciously, of course, when I took the offer to play with them, and I went to rehearsal the first time, I remember my forearms were on fire, man, after playing with them, just because of the speed that they play with and the intensity. So then you go live, and you've got the live energy, and it's even faster, man, you know. And so it was definitely probably one of the more intense shows that I got to play with them, you know. And it's just pure death metal, which is the only real, I guess you'd say, the pure death metal album that I did. So it was just even more intense, you know. It was definitely more intense, and a great experience to be up there with those guys. I wish I could have played more with them.
All right. It's great to know. You brought up why you couldn't play further on with Monstrosity because of Cynic coming back again. And then, of course, there's, you know, and what I want to get is a different picture, because there's a lot talked about how Focus probably would have never happened, right? With, Paul and Sean having their whole thing with their equipment being kept apart. Sorry, let me take that again. There's a whole story about how Focus never happened, where, you know, Paul and Sean had their equipment kept in Germany. I believe there was the hurricane happened in Florida and stuff like that. Take me back to that time, because at this point, from what you've told me, Cynic has been through a lot. I mean, you guys have kind of regrouped in there. What is the energy in the band at that time once you guys, because I'm sure the songs had been written for a while, right?
Well, that's not really. So, yeah, they had their challenges with their equipment being held back, which delayed the recording. But what really ended up delaying it was the hurricane, because at least when they were back, we could still play, and it wasn't like they didn't have a guitar, or we couldn't do it with the drum set over there. So we could still work on the music, but we actually used to rehearse in my house for a while. I had like a little insulated shed that we had set up like a little studio, and we had played back there, and then we got our warehouse space, and we actually invested, and it was a nice warehouse space. And then the hurricane hit, and the hurricane knocked practically the door halfway off of the warehouse, and there was some water damage in there. And then I actually lost my house in the hurricane. A third of the roof was ripped off, and so everything got damaged. The hurricane turned, so I lived further south than anybody. So it turned and it hit the south. So Paul and Sean's house, everybody got damaged, but it was structurally sound. They didn't get damage to their equipment. But my house was destroyed. I even remember the first thing I did after the hurricane was I ran to my equipment, and I knew the amps were gone, but it was the guitars that I wanted to save and take them out and dry them out and all that. And then Paul and Sean eventually, because the roads were all blocked, they made it out to my house, and I gave them everything I could salvage and said, dude, take it to your dry house. And, they took care of my guitars and all that. But so we had lost warehouse space, we had lost equipment in the process, and then you had to, it wasn't like we were, I just didn't have money to go buy new equipment and new amps and all that. Luckily, my family had home insurance, but you had to wait for that process to come through to get the money and then get the equipment. So it just really delayed the whole process of the album getting recorded. And that's where a lot of the change had come through that you would hear from our last demo to the Focus album.
Yeah.
Was not only did we have time, and in that time, that natural transition happened with us, because at that point we were listening to a lot of different styles of music besides death metal or speed metal. And then also the opportunity when you get the insurance money and you're like, man, I can get some new equipment. And then by that time, we also knew a couple music stores, and we had been in the scene for a while, so they gave us like the inside deals, and that's when I ended up getting the guitar synth, and things just started to really expand. So that also affected the end result of Focus. So it's interesting, it could have never happened, but that delay actually kind of made it what it is.
Yeah, and you can turn a really tough situation into a positive,
into
right?
a positive situation. Yeah, absolutely.
So now that you're talking about this whole space, how did the whole sound, what is the kind of influences or the inspirations that kind of brought in? Because like when I'm even 25 years or so later listening to the album, right, I still can't believe what was happening back then, or how did it come all about. So if you could just shed some light on that.
I guess, and well, I mean, you know where all the metal and all the heavy influence came from, but I guess also coming from Miami, the Latin music and the whole scene, so that was also an influence. Just being open is a very international city to other styles, and we were very hard on each other. We weren't competitive with other bands. We're always open and friendly with other bands, but with each other as members, we were very not competitive, but we really pushed each other, to push our limits musically. And we ended up not getting bored, but we ended up feeling like, man, we've done most of what we could do with metal, and so we started really listening to other styles of music, and that's when jazz came in. That's when I remember listening to like Chick Corea, Inside Out was like mind-blowing for us, and Mahavishnu Orchestra was a huge influence for us. Alan Holdsworth was a big influence. For me, guitar-wise, Wes Montgomery was, solo-wise, was a big influence. So we just started really listening to other styles of music, and we never considered ourselves like we have to be death metal, or this is what we wanted to play. This is what we were playing. And so as these other influences came in, it started to reflect in our music. And as we started, we actually, when I said we went in and did our recordings, you had choice in college, classical or jazz, and we went for jazz. And what we were really looking for, and what I really gained, for example, is a lot of different voicings and how to really change the voicings in your chords and everything like that. So learning standards and music like that really changed our perspective on how to write and chords to use. And you just take the jazz chords and you put the distortion up, and that's some of the stuff that was going on in Focus. So I think it was just like you've heard, I'm sure before, a natural evolution for us, and it was just we weren't getting enough dynamic in the death metal, because if you're just playing heavy all the way through, you don't get the or like the fast and slow dynamic, the push and pull, and you get that with the mellower parts, which makes the heavier parts that much more intense. So we really just started to experiment with that and listening to players like Holdsworth or. I remember Vinnie Caliuta and Dave Weckl were big, with Reinert and down the line, of course, when like Malone joined us, Jaco Pastorius, and it's just all these other influences that have come in. And since we weren't trying to be a death metal band, we were just trying to play whatever we want. Our goal was to just release what we wanted to play, man, and that was the problems we had with the record companies, is they wanted to label us as a death metal band or as a speed metal, thrash, whatever you want to call us. And we're like, we just want to play what we want to play. We don't want to conform to being, 5 rhythms and repeat a verse and a chorus. We just wanted to do what we wanted to do and put whatever styles of music in it as we wanted to. So it just kind of evolved that way, And then when we got synths and we got some of the other sounds, it was just like a little bag of goodies to play with, and you just started experimenting, and from there the vocals went, and because we also with the vocals we noticed that if we have the soft music or the clean guitars and then the heavy and all that, then we really couldn't just do all growls, and so that's where the computer side kind of came in with Paul. And and I think that, again, being in Miami, that's what kind of separated us from a lot of the rest of the death metal scene. We didn't have that pure death metal influence around us. We had a multitude of different styles of music around us, and it just kind of came out that way.
Right, that makes a lot
I
of
hope
sense.
that, hope that it seems like that's a fair answer there.
I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about the influence of Roadrunner, because at one point, if you look at it, and when you look back, Roadrunner had all the big death metal acts, right? And then you had that entire phase, and then I think it was probably, if you say the mid 90s, there were barely any left. So what was the influence, and why did you as a band choose Roadrunner? Did you go with them?
We went with Roadrunner because they're the only label that would sign us. That's how it is. So I mean, we shopped with many labels. We'd even go to we drove up to the New York Music Seminar and stood outside and gave demos out to people. I mean, we were just desperate, and we played every show and played with every band, and we didn't care what style of music you guys were. We'd play with you. And so again, the whole Roadrunner thing was the hype. We couldn't get signed, and then the hype of us playing with the other bands that we've already mentioned. We started to get a hype and a following with some fans, and Monty Connor was the A&R rep that ended up signing us. And not to say anything about Monty, I mean, his job is to see a band that's going to turn dollars for them. That's an A&R rep. That's what they're supposed to do, what's going to sell and all that. So he saw the hype. He saw that there was potential. He heard our demos, which wasn't necessarily the album. That was another surprise when that came out to them. So he kind of took a leap with us and said, okay, I'm going to sign you. And then he would tell us flat out, I don't think you guys are sellable. I don't think you're catchy. I really don't think that you're not someone I would normally sign. So they ended up giving us a deal, and I remember we got the contract, and you go to a music, entertainment lawyer, and of course you try to negotiate. So we took it there. We had them, readjust a few things, and we took it back to Roadrunner, and we gave it to them, and they just laughed. I mean, almost rolled back on their belly and on their back and laughed holding their belly, if you know what I mean, and said, no. Said to one of the people there, reprint the original contract. They gave it back to us, and they said, this is it. There's no negotiation. We're not doing anything else, and so it was the only deal we could get. Right. And so we took it. It was do or die at that point, because really, at that point, if we didn't do it, it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot that's been written about, or there's a lot of stories about post the release of the album, and eventually where Cynic kind of went on a break, a long extended break. But I want to fast forward quickly, and especially since you kind of moved out of music. What was it like? I mean, because I was reading while doing research some of the things where when Cynic regrouped post the 10-year reissue that Roadrunner did of the album, and there was a sudden interest. Why did you choose not to join the band then?
Very simple. So when they decided to do the reissue and then the reunion tour had come up, at that time I had I was married at the time. I had 2 kids. I had one in like younger elementary school, one in high school, had a mortgage, I basically stopped playing professionally. I was still playing music, but I played it for myself at home, Pro Tools, all that. And I had a normal job. I had a normal life with my family. So when it came back up, I get a call from Paul and Sean. They're like, hey, they're going to reissue the album. Awesome, man. We're thinking about a reunion tour. Can you do it? And I'm like, I'm open. But are we going to make any money this time? Because we really never made any money off Focus. And I said, because I can't just leave my family and, I still have bills to pay. I actually have a life now. And there was no guarantee of it. At that time, Paul and Sean were in a different situation. They weren't necessarily, in a relationship or kids or anything like that. So it was a lot easier to do it for them. But for me, I had family ties and all that. And so I was open to do it. And it would have been really cool. I had talked to him and I'm like, that'd be awesome to go and play and tour. I mean, come on, who doesn't want to do that? And who doesn't want to go play shows and all that? But it just wasn't financially sound and wasn't financially set. And I'm actually glad I didn't, because it wasn't like they made enough. I would have probably lost my house and everything that I had to do it. So it wasn't that I didn't want to. It just wasn't possible.
But I'm gonna do 2 parts of this question. One was, after the whole reaction to Focus when it came out initially, and the touring, I've read a lot about it, where you guys were touring with Cannibal Corpse and stuff like that, to then 10 years later the reissue where you had a new generation of metalheads. So what was your reaction to first a reissue of the album, and now that it's been another 10 years since then, people are still discovering the album on a regular basis? I mean, this becomes basically like your Metal 101 or Tech Metal 101. So what do you think about it? Like, what was your initial reaction 10 years ago, and even till today, if you could say?
Well, it never took off when we first did it. I think, you say like the Tech 101, I think a lot of people said it was kind of ahead of its time, the Focus album, and so I guess in a sense it was. So when it was reissued and then they did the touring and support, that's when I really started to see people starting to actually catch on to Focus, And I talked to a lot of the people that appreciate it, fans or whatever you want to call it, and a lot of them didn't pick up on the album until almost early 2000s, and or until it was re-released. So that was very interesting for me to see. And actually, before the interview, like we had talked before, it still blows my mind that I'm sitting here with you right now doing this interview, and that people are still interested and still picking up the album, because it's been 26 years since it's been released now. So, it's a bittersweet thing. It's bittersweet because all I wanted to do was be a musician, was to spend my whole life being a musician, and I would have loved for Cynic to just continue on, and it never would have stopped. So that just wasn't meant to be. And that's kind of the bitter, side of it. The sweet side of it is it's an absolute honor for me and a compliment, and I'm very humbled. It's still, I still have a hard time getting my head around it, that the album has finally done so well, or has taken on such recognition, and we've gotten really been given a lot of credit as kind of being one of the starters of the tech metal scene. And I was talking to Vishal, and he was telling me some of the bands that really had a lot of influence or credit us for a lot of influence. And these are great players and great musicians.
There's a band named Veil of Maya.
Yes, exactly.
I think that tells you
that
on the kind of
says a bit. And
influence.
that's, so for me, that's a huge honor.
Yeah.
It's a huge honor, and it's almost better than if it would have worked out and then faded out into obscurity back in the early 90s. You know what I mean? So it's funny, like we never made much money, but I tell people that I'm getting paid now for it. And just in opportunities like this to do an interview with you or meeting people that appreciate my music is absolutely so heartwarming, especially when it was done so long ago, and that it's actually still an album that stands strong. And you see so many albums that are, they're hot and then they're not, you know what I mean? And so I guess that's the best way I could describe it, is that I guess everything works out in the best for the end, and I'm happy that it's become such a strong album and kind of considered a classic or something like that.
And
so
I mean it's the same way, like you said. For me, it's also an honor to kind of speak to you and just revisit these old stories.
Absolutely.
And stuff like that.
Absolutely.
But just to kind of wrap up, now that we've talked so much, and in our previous interview with Paul, he's talked about Cynic coming back soon. Would you be open to an opportunity like you were earlier to probably just play a one-off show, if not a tour with Cynic? So
I don't think it's possible. I'll be honest with you. I don't think it's possible. Even if I was open to do it, Reinert and Paul, they definitely are not going to work together again. And that I've definitely talked to them, and it's something that's not going to happen. And when you're in a band for as long as they were and you're together, it's like being in a marriage, and and it's almost like there's a lot of baggage that gets created, and not to bring up anything negative with the Cynic or the Sean and Paul thing, but it would almost be asking someone that has been married for a long time, would you just get married for another month? And what I mean? So,
of course.
So I don't think that it's possible. Now, on the personal level with me, to be honest, the direction that Cynic has gone since Focus is in a different direction that I would have gone.
Right.
And that was also one of the reasons, because we did talk after the reunion and did talk about redoing me actually being part of some of the newer, I guess
actually that's a great thing. Would you have been? Were you given an option to be part of Trace Tenaire? Because that
we talked about it.
Right,
yeah,
okay.
We did talk about it, and it was something that we were discussing, but the direction wasn't for me, because for me, not you again, like we had spoke before the interview also, you're in a different place 10 years later, but still the direction that they wanted to go, I still wanted to attain a little bit more of the heavy edge, and
Right.
that was kind of and they didn't want to do the heavy vocals and stuff like that as much, and so it just really it didn't feel organic for me and all that, so I opted not to do it, and it wasn't like they're in any way begging me to do it. It was just we talked about it, and I said I don't think it's for me, so just because it went in a different direction that I wasn't I guess comfortable with.
Okay. Yeah.
I would have thought it would have been a different style of band,
No, and again, and then that's one of the things. I mean, you have a huge divide among Cynic fans with, again, because I look at it as Focused and Trace Tenaire, there is, but anything post Trace Tenaire is just completely completely.
And that's the direction that it was already going. I saw that coming.
Okay.
I saw that coming. Even with Trace Tenaire, I saw that kind of coming in that direction, and so that's kind of the reason that I wasn't interested in going down that route. And I Cynic was a hard band. So if you look at the players in the band, if you look at the level of musicianship that we held ourselves to, we were pretty rough on each other, and we had, it wasn't like it's funny, I've talked to people and they thought, oh, we're sitting there very scholarly and, let's do this and do that. No, we would pretty much go to band practice, lace up the gloves and go into the middle of the stage and box it out and figure out, what we were going to do, So it was a hard album to record because it was almost like it's all A-type personality people. We all wanted to get our stuff and you all wanted to do things a certain way. And it really worked out for Focus, but I think it would have been really hard to repeat, and still now that the directions have gone even further across, and now we're all a little older, I think it would be even a little bit more violent, if anything, so I just thought it was best that we, that I stay out of it, you know what I mean?
Right.
So,
and I know you touched a little bit about it earlier, so I'm going to probe a bit more. You said that you stopped doing music professionally, but still playing. What's the kind of music you listen to nowadays or play also?
Well, so I had stopped I stopped professionally and I played for many years, and then I stopped playing. I actually put the guitar down. I mean, never 100%. I always have a guitar around, but I would pick it up and play it a couple times here or there. And what had happened to me was I had just gotten really frustrated with the whole music industry and just the industry can steal the creativeness out of the artists, So in a sense, I was a little bitter with that, and so I played for myself, but I ended up putting the guitar down and I've always been into photography, and I had a photography business for a little while in Portland, and so I kind of focused on that, and I kind of put the music down and stopped. As far as listening to music, to me, there's any style of music. There's good bands and there's not so good bands, and I've always been open to all styles of music. So I still really listen to anything and everything. To be honest, I've been out of the metal scene. Like I think you had mentioned a band, and I'm like, I haven't heard that name yet, and so I've really been out of the metal scene. Still listen to some jazz. Still listen to a lot of the classic music and jazz, but I still love old Motown and still music like that. But even some of the pop stuff, and my son is into some of the rap stuff, and there's a couple guys, J. Cole, and I think are really cool. And so music is music to me. I'm just open and listen to anything that I find good. I enjoy all different styles. We actually got the chance to go see the Mohan brothers here in India. I love Indian classical music also, and this has been another thing that we've been trying to see while we're here and all that. But so yeah, I can't say there's any style that I listen to, and why contain myself or to anything when there's such good music out there in the world.
Just to kind of wrap up, what's next for you? I mean, both, if I could ask personally as well as musically, what would it take to kind of get you to pick up the guitar again or play something?
This trip is what it took. I had done the family thing. Like I said, I was married. I'm divorced now. My kids are adults now, and I went on this trip, and this was kind of a spiritual journey, just kind of a reconnection with myself journey. Right. And this was not meant to be a musical trip. And so I started traveling around Southeast Asia, and I would just put it out on social media, and people started reaching out to me. My music came back. There's just a lot of Cynic, and of course, Gordian and Monstrosity, and a lot of people started contacting me. So this trip has really had a lot of music in it, and a lot of, even this interview, like with you, a lot of these things had come up. So I think that it kind of sparked my fire again, So I'm actually itching to get back and start playing again. And Sean Reinert and I have talked actually for a couple years about doing a project, and it just hasn't been able to kind of work out. So I actually spoke with him just a couple days ago, and I said, I'm coming back to the States, and I've just been really sparked to play again. I've met some incredible musicians. Now, let me put this out there. I'm not stuck on any style. I don't want to get in a band, and I don't want to get on a label. I don't want to get stuck in one style. What I would really love to do is collaborate with. There's some great musicians that I've met, and do collaborations of different styles of music, and just actually enjoy music. I don't need music to pay my bills anymore. So that pressure isn't there. So it's really for the love of music again. So like I said, I've met some great people that I've talked to, and I'm like, yeah, let's talk about collaborating. Let me get back to the States. Let me warm my fingers up again, and let me get back on the guitar and get a little get some of the feel back. And the first one that I'll probably do, or at least the first one that I was talking about, is with Sean Reinert. We had talked for a while about doing it, so I told him, you know what, when I come back to the States, it's actually cheaper to fly through California and then go to Miami. So I'm going to stop by and I'm going to see you, and we're going to, of course, it'd be just the beginning stage, but we're going to talk about it, and we're going to see what we can put together and kind of maybe set some ground rules of what we want to do. But
that's a start.
God willing, universe willing, I'll be back, and I don't know what I'm going to put out. I hope that it still holds up to the fans' expectations of me. But I'm going to do it for myself, for the love of music, for the passion of music, and I think that's the most sincere, organic way to play. So hopefully we'll have some good stuff coming out in the near future.
I really look forward to it. How can people follow you on this journey of yours? What's the best way people can do it?
I guess standard social media, Facebook. I do have a Facebook musician page, Jason Gobel musicians page, and I do have my regular Facebook page, and that's where I post everything. That's where I've met most people on my journey here, and I've tried to post my journey on a personal level and on the music side. Just to share, because I've been so fortunate to be able to travel and to do this. So so if there's any interest or in following me, of course, friend request me. I accept all friend requests, especially from fellow musicians and music lovers. And feel free. I'm always open. I always respond to messages. I'm not, as we spoke before too, I think that your fan base is what makes you as a musician.
Definitely.
So you have to be there and be available. So, friend request me, send me a message. If you have any questions, I'm always open to fellow musicians and projects. And, we'll just see what happens. But I'm there. I'm on social media and very easy to find. Very easy to find.
All right. Thank you very much for your time, Jason. It's been a pleasure. Wish you all the best with not only your journey, but also the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on the podcast and for giving me the opportunity. Like I said, I'm just amazed that we're even doing this after so many years in reference to Cynic. If I could give a shout out to Vishal for sending us, putting us together and connecting us for this interview. Amazing musician, and Amogh Symphony, and just absolutely grateful to him. He's a wonderful guy, and thank you personally, and it was a great time talking with you, and we'll I'm sure talk again in the future.
Definitely,
and go from there.
Wow, man, that was quite a chat.
Oh yeah, I really enjoyed it, and especially in the end, it's so nice to kind of hear that after all these years, Jason has got the whole inspiration to do music again. So I'm definitely going to stay in touch, and we're going to keep a lookout. Thanks, for sharing all that information with us, Jason. We're going to stay tuned to what you're up to next.
Yeah, and you know what? I know on the chat we didn't really have a chance to play any music, so let's do this one slightly differently.
Yeah.
Let's end this episode with a Cynic song that we've actually asked Jason now via email on which song he would like to end the podcast with.
Yeah, and he said, how could I? So let's cue that one up.
All right, you know how to reach us. We're at Horns Up Pod. I'm at Asmo Annie.
And I'm Trend Crusher.
And this is Cynic's How Could I?